Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us at this press conference with the Independent International Fact-Finding Mission on the Sudan. As you may know, the fact-finding mission was created by the UN Human Rights Council in October 2023 to investigate all alleged violations of human rights that occurred in the context of the ongoing armed conflict. The mission presented the findings of its latest report to the General Assembly's Third Committee this morning, and now they're here to answer any questions that you may have. The chair of the mission was unfortunately unable to join us today, but we're pleased to have with us fellow experts Joy Ngozi Izello and Mona Rishmawi, who will start us off with the opening remarks. And then we will open the floor up to your questions. So thank you. Please, welcome to start. Okay.
No, thank you very much, and thank you for being here. Today is a very difficult day for Sudan. You know, as we are talking, Fasher and the people of Fasher are experiencing extremely difficult situation, brutality of high level. So our fact-finding mission today, as my colleague just said, we presented to the third committee a picture of a country trapped in atrocities. This war has been waged not only by the two armed forces, but more importantly, what we have been seeing is that it's against the people of Sudan, the civilians of Sudan. For more than 2.5 years, we've been documenting serious violations of human rights and IHL by the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid response forces. Torture, murder, summary execution, sexual violence are only a few of the main violations that are taking place. We are also documenting attacks on infrastructure that is vital to the survival of the civilian population. Hospitals, markets, water stations have been destroyed by both the warring parties, and of course, homes and properties looted. The Rapid Response Force also attacked and displaced entire communities, often based on ethnic grounds. Last year we reported on the situation of the Masalites in Al Jazeera, in Al Jenaina, and now we are very concerned about the same issues, the same kind of violations in Al Fasher, amounting both to crimes against humanity, including extermination. Nowhere is more, these violations are more visible than Al Fasher today, where the RSF and allied militias have laid siege to the city for more than 500 days, as you know, before it fell under their control earlier this week. They've been cutting food, medicine, and aid, and you know this very well as members of the press, and you've been reporting on that, and were attacks on IDP camps such as Zamzam and Abu Shouk, which have left thousands killed, wounded, or displaced during this siege. This means that this attack, this week's attack, comes as the population is extremely tired. They are starved, they lack hospitals, they lack basic infrastructure for them to survive. One hospital that we unfortunately are hearing more disturbing reports about these days, a Saudi hospital was attacked for 25 times alone, and today there are disturbing reports which needs to be verified, but the WHO has already confirmed that there are attacks that killed perhaps hundreds of patients there. So we continue to receive credible reports and video images of ethnically targeted executions of unarmed civilians, assaults, sexual violence, widespread looting, destruction of vital infrastructure, and mass forced displacement. Humanitarian access remains blocked, making the situation of starvation and disease even more difficult for the civilians trapped in this situation. Those who fled El Fasher, included wounded and unaccompanied children and women, risked further sexual violence. These ongoing atrocities mark a dangerous escalation of the RSF campaign of brutality. Unfortunately, these are not incidental acts of war. They form a pattern. They form a deliberate strategy to terrorize and starve civilians, particularly from certain ethnic groups, non-Arab ethnic groups. We have documented sexual violence on a horrific scale all over Sudan. Women and girls subjected to rape, gang rape, and sexual slavery, used as a weapon of humiliation and control. The patterns are systematic and targeted. The survivors we met carry deep physical and psychological scars, and yet they continue to call for justice with extraordinary courage. We recorded, as I mentioned before, torture, arbitrary detention, extrajudicial executions, and the collapse of the justice institutions have erased any avenue for redress at the national level. Unfortunately, impunity is total. We have issued 2 reports. We have a report that we were discussing today. It's called A War of Atrocities, Sudan, A War on Atrocities. And today we issued also another report that my colleague will talk about how the justice system is dealing with these issues.
Thank you, Muna, and thank you for coming for this press conference. Continuing from where my colleague, expert Muna, stopped, today's report, Paths to Justice, Accountability for Atrocities in Sudan, presents a roadmap for how justice can be achieved for victims of this devastating conflict in Sudan. Our findings describe a country where the rule of law has collapsed and impunity has prevailed over the centuries. Courts deliver selective justice without offering fair trials, and adequate protection and effective remedies to victims and survivors. We concluded that Sudan is currently unwilling and unable to conduct genuine investigation or prosecution for international crimes. Our report therefore sets out a path to justice through inclusive Sudanese dialogue, relying on 4 interconnected pillars: truth, justice, reparations, and institutional reforms. Each is essential if Sudan is to rebuild a credible foundation for peace. Victims, survivors, and Sudanese society have the right to know the truth about violations committed, the fate of the missing, and the role of authorities. We urged continued documentation of crimes, full participation of Sudanese civil society, and the creation of registers, including for harms suffered. Victims also have the right to see perpetrators held accountable through fair trials. We recommend expanding the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court over the entire territory of Sudan and establishing an independent judicial mechanism operating in partnership with the ICC. We also call for creation of Victim Support and Reparations Office that is designed with survivors and resourced to provide medical, psychosocial, and livelihood assistance. The conviction of Ali Ghashib by the ICC on 6th October is the first of its kind, and in relation to Darfur conflict, proves that justice for Sudanese victims is possible. But it cannot stop here. The same international resolve that delivered that judgment is now needed to address the current wave of atrocities. States should also apply universal jurisdiction to prosecute international crimes. We urge member states, regional organizations, and partners to act together to strengthen our mandate to ensure full cooperation with the International Criminal Court and to place victims at the center of all peace and accountability efforts. We further call on states to support targeted sanctions and arms embargo against those responsible. Above all, we call for protection for the civilians trapped in this conflict, for the survivors of violence, and for the humanitarian workers risking their lives to reach them. The people of Sudan are demanding not sympathy, but solidarity, a commitment that their suffering will not be ignored, and that those responsible for their pain will one day face justice. It is within our collective power to make that promise real. Thank you once more for coming. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for those important opening remarks. Now we can open the floor to questions, so we can start with the room. Please go ahead, and then we'll come. If you could just please identify yourself and the outlet you work
Stefano
for.
Vaccara, Ital Press, La Voce di New York. Thank you for this. How many, I mean, in those basically the most 2 years, how many, do you have exact numbers of how many civilians died and how many civilians were victims of, sexual violence and so on? Do you have this number?
Yes, so in our report last September, we talked about, if I remember correctly, it's about 28,000 people we think were killed so far in the current conflict. So from April 2023 to this. Sexual violence is very hard to get a figure of, but what we can tell you is that the reporting have tripled on sexual violence in the last few months. So because there is a lot of cases which are unreported, it goes underreported because of stigma, because of shame and all this stuff, and really people are hesitant. How do we know about it? We know about it most of the time is from the medical community, so from the victims and survivors themselves, but also from doctors and midwives and so on who help survive. So we know it's rampant because that's what we are told. We know that there is evidence of it because we talk to medical people who are telling us this, but I cannot give you numbers on that.
Yes, I was not just talking about sexual violence, in general violence against civilians. Well, from your number and also from what we heard in these months, would you consider that Sudan is the greatest humanitarian crisis in the world in this moment? Yes. Or in the last, I would say more than this moment, the last few months. So I come now to my question, my real question after those two. How you can see this room, we are very few in this room. So I ask you, why, to both of you, why do you think the world was not so much interested in the suffering of millions of people in Sudan? Why, if there's a situation, for example, of the responsibility to protect civilians, and I don't think there is such a more evident situation, why this institution didn't act? I'm talking about the United Nations, the way, for example, acted in the past in different situations. Do you have an answer for this? Do you have? I mean, it's because it's an African country, it's not in the Middle East, or it's not in Europe. What is the reason why the world is not acting for the people of Sudan the way they act for other people?
Thank you for that and those concerns that have been expressed. Yes, we've had questions as this. Why is Sudan not gaining that kind of traction that even some people don't know about the war? Not too long, I addressed also the African University and some postgraduate students. Some people don't really know and understand fully what's going on. And I agree with you, it could be amongst the conflict going on now, one of the worst humanitarian crisis in terms of numbers. If you look at the numbers of those that are displaced within and outside Sudan, we are talking of over 11 million. And if you talk about those that are facing acute famine, you're looking at over 25 million, and then deaths in thousands. So it's really huge. And the civilian population is affected. The conflict has engulfed the whole of Sudan, and we just saw over 800,000 people and trapped in El Fasher that just fell. Even I'm an African and I live in Africa, and I really also say in my mind that also for African leaders, they need to do more. But again, the issue of world politics can influence these things, because the issue of how this idea of sovereignty, respect sovereignty of a country, and then when they think it more like an internal conflict and not international conflict, you begin to create these complexities. And then, of course, we know it's internationalized. Many countries are facing, refugees from Sudan all over, in Chad, in Car, in Egypt, in Kenya and Uganda, and so they are all over the place. So it's talking about protection of civilians, that's paramount. And I think also that's why we're having this media conference. As for the UN, I think they've shown enough commitment. The establishment of this mandate as an international independent fact-finding mission shows clearly that the international community is not ignoring Sudan, and it will interact with Sudanese civil society, and they welcome the creation of this as the independent, credible fact-finding mission that can look into this. And we have ever since been issuing reports, been interacting, talking to witnesses and moving around. So that's one, it is, and renewal of this mandate, even despite some opposition, especially on ground of Africans, so sovereignty, solidarity, and against individual country mandate, also show that international community is aware and determined to do something. There is also a special envoy to the UN Secretary General on this. The African Union is doing something. But yet, we need to do more. I agree with you. And it needs to be out there in the front burner of international media and politics. It's not gaining that kind of traction. And people are so desperate. The war is brutal. The atrocities is a war of atrocities. So please, we can also tell colleagues in the media to report this, to try to see how they can gain more access. Just yesterday, we got the news that two officials of the World Food Organization, the program, has been PNG'd, so they've been sent out of the country. And this is sad, because we are talking of people facing acute famine. So we need to report. But I believe that even countries that are pushing for peace, many countries are doing something, but we need to do more, and also more from the continent of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a question here, and then we'll come to CBC. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for the briefing. This is Ahmed Ali with Sphinx News TV. In your report, you noted that the RSF has been dismantling judicial structures and targeting legal actors in the Darfur states, while setting up its own parallel mechanisms, which again have been rejected multiple times by members of the international community. With reports now that, again, as you mentioned previously, the RSF holds full administrative control, essentially, over Al Fasher, effectively giving it authority across almost all of Western Sudan. Do you assess an imminent risk of evidence destruction and witness elimination? And if that is the case, are there already protocols in place to protect those documentation and survivor testimonies in order to ensure that specifically members of the RSF leadership can be held accountable in the future? Thank you so much.
No, thank you for the question. It's really important. We can go by previous practice. Yes, it's very true that when RSF moved in particular locations, Janina is one of them last year, we have seen a lot of destruction of courts with files, of buildings, of infrastructure, computers, all this stuff. And there is a lot of intimidation of witnesses. It's very true. I mean, witnesses, lawyers, judges have been arrested and so on. So, of course, it's a major concern about what we are, this attempt, I will say, attempt to destroy records and archives. But what I would say here, despite everything that they are doing, and sometimes they are not the only ones, I have to say, so also there is destruction and there is attacks from other sides, particularly the allied forces. Despite all this, evidence is there. And people are documenting. We know that there are records also outside the country. They are not only inside the country. We know that for a fact. And accountability will come. Accountability is going to come.
Okay, thank you. CBC, please go ahead. If you could just identify yourself.
Thank you so much for this briefing. Chris Reyes with Canadian Broadcasting. Just a few questions here, so if you can bear with me. So the first is picking up on what Stefano asked about the lack of international intervention and engagement. Given what we saw in Gaza and how much might and muscle it took to bring about that ceasefire, what kind of international consortium do you think it will take to act on this crisis? And picking up on that, give us a sense of what happens if there's no action now. I mean, we heard a devastating briefing today from Tom Fletcher saying there are no more civilians left in Fasher. That's a devastating detail. So what happens if there is no action now? And then just finally, given everything that you've found in this investigation, what do you make of the leader of the RSF declaring today that they're going to be investigating their soldiers for atrocities, for the atrocities that happened during the capture of Fasher? Do you find that laughable, that's the claim that they're making?
I start and then my colleague comes in as well. The reality today is that we have many people in many parts of the world that are suffering a lot. And they all need our attention. And the international system is built, and the peace and security system is built to help that. That's why the United Nations is there. It's built to prevent this kind of atrocities and this kind of war. So I think they all look at us and look at these institutions like the United Nations, but also bilaterally, also individual states, to really influence, to really do what they can to bring these wars to an end. So on this, what I would like to say is just there are a number of states that have influence on the parties in Sudan, and now coming to Sudan specifically. These states have a duty not to fuel the conflict. They have an obligation under humanitarian law and human rights law not to be complicit in international crimes and atrocities. And unfortunately, there are a lot of atrocities that are taking place. So I think it can be stopped. The war in Sudan can be stopped if we stop the weapons, if we stop the flow of arms, if we stop those who are benefiting from the war. It can be stopped. Now you asked a very important question with regard to the investigations by RSF. I think, to tell you the truth, and you'll see it in our report, we looked at the previous statements like that, and they are yet to yield any result. We are yet to see anything. It's opaque. These kind of statements and the institutions that they establish are opaque, are not transparent, and we have no evidence whatsoever and no confidence whatsoever that it will lead to anything. So instead of right now just stop the atrocities, stop it, rather than establishing something that will look, establish, allow the UN in, allow the fact-finding in, our commission and others in, allow the International Criminal Court in. And there are specialized organizations that can do these investigations, but frankly, at this stage, these statements are not credible.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That question was very important. And what has happened in Fasher, and what is going on, that civilians have fled, is another chapter in the book of brutality that we've seen. The highest, the hostilities, the atrocities is unimaginable. And when you think it's between people from the same country. So I think they've seen, that, and that's documented. We've seen videos that we've verified. So for RSF now to have called for this, they know that not just this, but this has reached not just only unacceptable, and it is really a big issue that accountability is the only thing that can redress it. So we don't have faith that the transparency of the process and investigation, and that people will be punished appropriately, because we've seen the issue of, my colleague talked about the opaqueness, but again, selective justice, and we just have to keep documenting, preserving evidence as much as possible, working also with the people on ground and Sudanese, so that at the end of the day, there will be accountability. Arms embargo, stopping the flow of weapons will help. The war economy, looking at the whole war economy and the external, actors and those who are benefiting from it, is also the people that must be brought on the table to ensure that the flow of arms stop, the economy around this war stop, and is really terrible that the war, we know the powers that can get this done, but so far it looks like they are not listening, very well, and they are not listening and not keeping to agreement, including gender declaration,
Just as a follow-up, is it worth naming the states that need to step in and those who are actually fueling this conflict?
Yes, and there's some have named, but for us also as fact-finding mission, we are building our, we're investigating, we're digging deeper, we're collecting information, we're trying to track the arms, and we will, at the appropriate time, also name names, because part of our mandate is identifying perpetrators and complicity, and then preserving those evidence. So it is also part of what we are digging into. Yes.
Just a follow-up on this is, my colleague just asked you said before, we know what are the country that can stop that because they have influence on the part in conflict. Now, this is a press conference. It goes on the video online. Potentially millions of people can see. Could you name who, if you can say, at least the country that in this moment have an influence on stopping the killing because they have an influence? I'm not saying that they're giving them the weapons. I'm just saying that they have, political influence. Can you name those countries? Those countries are 1, 2, 3. Which one?
Now we are getting into the politics of the conflict. And I think there are several processes that are underway. And I think what is very important, and why I mentioned that particular phrasing, is that the fall of Al-Fasher happened a few days after the Quad met. And the Quad met and said 3 months, you stop the fighting for 3 months. And then a few days later, we find the situation that we are in today, and you are reporting on Al-Fasher and we are documenting on Al-Fasher. So we find the situation very, very difficult. So I think these kind of processes are very important, and they are the hope that by sitting together with the countries, they are identified, who are these countries, and sitting together, they can do something beyond just saying, stop the fighting, and then it's not followed up. So that's why this is important.
Okay, do we have any more questions from the room or online? No? Okay, if not, then that brings us to the end of this press conference. Thank you for coming today. Thanks.